This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, not burdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be happy. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be happy. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to false views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world.
Thank you, Ajahn. If we can, and Venerable, if I can hand it over to you to explain about meditation and how to meditate, and then lead us in a guided meditation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the thing about meditation, which is very, very beautiful and sometimes very, very tricky, is that it's really a voyage inwards. It's something which does take a while to develop, and it's something that develops a lot of confidence in yourself, which is very, very useful because it helps to relax. And to be able to relax, you need to be comfortable with yourself, which is, in today's world, is not very common. And so meditation is a wonderful tool to help relax. Just to be here. That it's okay to be here, it's okay to meditate and relax, because we have so many pressures, we have so many duties and burdens and other things we have to worry about, and indeed in COVID times there's lots of things we have to worry about. But meditation's a time when we can put that down and we don't have to worry so much. Because it's okay to be concerned, but it's also okay to be more present and come back. And that's the beauty of meditation, and that's really what we're in for. So the big important thing about meditation is when you go inwards, generally speaking, it's pretty much foreign territory. It's not a place that we're very familiar with. So we often, can't find our way around because we're not really used to doing this. And that's why mindfulness is particularly useful, because it brightens the mind. It sort of turns the light on in areas of the mind which we aren't used to, and we probably haven't actually ever seen before, no matter how old we are. But the usefulness of it is that gives us a real sense of confidence in ourselves, that we can navigate these challenges that we face, and that we can do it in a way which is beneficial to ourselves and to others, and gives us a quality of life which again, we often look for sort of quality in external things, but quality inwards is quite a rare thing and quite a wonderful thing. And that's something meditation really helps develop. So when we go inwards, practice mindfulness and so on, one of the things that's very important is interest. Being interested in what you're doing. The joy is important. The happiness is important. The interest is important. All these things help you to stay in the moment. Because the thing is that when we aren't really that interested, we will very quickly fall asleep. We'll very quickly wander off into other thoughts and other problems because we don't really want to be here. It's a job, it's a chore. Oh, I have to meditate, And of course, unfortunately, most people meditate out of a duty, as sort of a spiritual obligation. Like, I'm Buddhist, I should be meditating kind of thing. Oh, great, when is this over with? Unfortunately, lots of people do that, but it deprives you of quite a lot. Your meditation doesn't go very far, and you really don't enjoy yourself, and you don't really get many good insights out of it. And after 5-10 years, you might just sort of, or less, it could be a few weeks, you could sort of say, what am I doing this for? I might as well just go back to watching a TV or surfing the web or just doing nothing. So having that interest and having that time for yourself is really important. And that's the benefit of meditation, because it's time for you. And that's one of the real sort of pluses of being a monk is, yes, we have a lot of things we have to do, but after all the business is done for the day, back to our rooms we go, and it's quiet time. And that's the time we can spend in meditation and to study and develop things to help us in that. And it's a practice which gets richer and richer the more you go. So, let's make a start. Might as well go for it. So, I invite everybody just to get comfy in your chair. Big important thing. Give yourself a wiggle, make sure you're settled in. Get nice and comfy in your chair, because you've probably been sitting for a few minutes and your joints might have changed shape. And it helps to loosen the muscles that way. And then, if you want to put on your blanket or anything else, it might be cold in the part of the world you are, or adjust your climate control if you're in a hot part of the world. This is the time to do it. And then when you're ready, we can close our eyes and settle in. And the first thing to be aware of is just this feeling of relaxing into the chair. Just settling in. Just this soft ease into the chair. It doesn't matter if you need to wiggle around or adjust your feet, that's fine. It might take a few minutes to settle down, and that's fine. Just spend your time taking your time. And now, see if you can feel the breath coming in and out. See if you can be aware of how that moves. Bring a bit of interest to your breath, because this is something that we don't do very often. We don't sit and watch the breath or feel it. We don't experience it that often. So bring some interest to find out, what does it feel like? What is it? Do you feel it in the nose? Do you feel it in the lungs? Do you feel it in your stomach? How do you feel it? And now imagine the breath flowing through your entire body, to see if you can feel the breath expanding and then relaxing as you breathe out. And now use the breath as a way to relax. See if you can use the breath to help the process of becoming brighter inside. With every breath in, use that to relax. And every breath out, relax as well. ask yourself, how can I make this easier? Is there tension in the body? Can we make this meditation easier? Because the easier it is, the more we want to be here, and the more we want to be here, the deeper you go. Is the breath getting softer? Is it getting calmer? What is the experience for you? Every breath is a fresh experience. Try each breath for the first time. If you find your mind is wandering, it's usually a sign that your interest has gone. Try to find that freshness, that interest. What is this experience like? Can we make this more pleasant, more relaxed? Can we enjoy this more? Now with every breath, breathe kindness, because it is kindness to breathe. It is an act of kindness to yourself to breathe. Allow that kindness to spread all through you. And with that kindness, breathe gentleness, as if your breath is a small bird in your hand. It doesn't need to be held tightly. That kindness and gentleness can spread all through you. Experiment. Experiment to see how kind and how gentle you can make the breath, because it will do that all on its own. And now imagine sharing that kindness and that gentleness. Imagine sharing it with someone very dear to you. invite them to take part in this experience with you. As you're sharing it, allow it to become brighter in yourself as well, so that it doesn't diminish, but it grows. Now imagine sharing this kindness throughout the whole room and your whole house, and everyone included in it. Let the kindness spread on the air. As you're breathing in and out, the kindness goes with it and fills the whole house. And now imagine expanding that space to include more. The houses in your neighborhood, everyone around you. Allow that kindness to expand, growing ever brighter and not diminishing, so that it can include more. And now expand it further. Imagine a mind of kindness as vast as the sky. That can include everyone. And now slowly bring back that kindness and that attention back into yourself. And share that kindness with yourself. And then bring your attention back to the breath. And just enjoy these last few minutes just being here. Nothing to do. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes. So, welcome back.
Most people are back, Venerable. If you'd to give us a talk or answer questions, what's your preference?
Oh, we could do a bit of both. I mean,
Okay.
I'll start sort of saying a few things about metta, kindness, which is the sort of what we were doing.
Good,
Sort
thank
of
you.
evolved a bit. Kindness has a very interesting history in Buddhism. It's part of a group of 4 meditations called the Brahma Viharas, or the ultimate or supreme abidings. The first one, of course, is the loving kindness, metta. Next one is compassion. The third one is a bit tricky for some of us to understand. It's not an idea we're very familiar with, but it's the joy of the happiness of others. Happy that other people are happy. And the fourth one is often called upekkha, often translated as equanimity, but it's also a state of the heart. So it's an equanimity that supports everything, that can embrace everything. And in the earliest phases of Buddhism, of meditation, this was a daily practice. This was something that monks and nuns did, and lay people, of course, did. This is something the Buddha taught. As time went on, though, it became less and less important and kind of got sidelined, which was kind of strange why that happened. But I once did a test with some of the online version of the early texts to see how often did the Buddha teach the Brahma Viharas compared to, say, breath meditation. And it turned out that it was nearly 3 times as much, which is interesting when you think about it. Most times that we do a guided meditation, it's nearly always breath meditation. And it's useful because it's pretty universal, everybody breathes, it's quite easy to access. But as time went on, the practice of kindness and the Brahma Viharas, of compassion and everything else, slowly became less important. And by the time the commentators came around, it seems to have been a practice that was really only just for very deep meditation, and it just doesn't really matter for the rest of the time. It's just sort of something that some people do. So that's quite a big shift as to why that happened. But it is in the text. It's quite clear that later on, it seems that it wasn't so much a daily practice, but a deeper retreat kind of thing. And there is a bit of a psychological reason for that, is that kindness is not very easy for people to do. Most of us, unfortunately, don't have very good relationships with ourselves. So that is quite tricky to really start to come back to ourselves. And generally when we practice mindfulness or present moment, we're sort of pulling ourselves back into the present moment, and we're dragging ourselves around and not having a very good time at all. And there's really sort of a drought of kindness in that. So developing it is very, very important, because it's kind of the glue that keeps everything together. A lot of the time, spiritual practice is something that we need to do. We need to be good people. We need to not do bad things, and so on and so on. So it's kind of we're obliged to do it, with the old sort of fear of, retribution or karma or rebirth or heaven and hell and all those kinds of things. But kindness is something you do because it's a delight to do. It's wonderful to do because it's so fulfilling, and it gives so much more to everyone, ourselves included, for not a lot. So it's fantastic. But it's also quite confronting, because when you really start developing the kindness, we start to become in contact with part of our mind, part of ourselves which we don't really have much contact with. And it's been sidelined for a very long time. And quite often at the beginning it sort of says, it has its own priority, so to speak, and we find out what it really needs. And for many of us, that part of our mind wants to be loved. And this sort of sounds a very sort of self-centered position, but actually it's quite a shock to realize that it isn't. It's a big realization that most of us don't live very fulfilled, very, love-filled lives. Most of us basically just run through lives because we have to. getting up, going to work because we need our pay packet, and so on and so on and so on, and going to school just to get our job and so on. It's just a way to survive, basically. And so we start changing our view, because when we realize, oh, we've been living a way which isn't very fulfilling, which isn't very rewarding for ourselves or for other people. So we start to change. And we do this naturally. So we don't have to try to be virtuous people. All of a sudden it seems a natural way to go because it just makes sense. But then it becomes a bit bigger, because it still seems this is a little bit superficial. And you start to include more in that, because this part of the mind, what it really wants is not only to be loved, but to love as well. It wants to express as much as, to give as much as receive. And that changes things again. And then our relationships change, our relationships improve. Everything becomes clearer. But gradually this becomes a bit superficial as well. It doesn't really seem to, it's a whole lot better than what we started with, but it's kind of, it doesn't really seem complete. And so we include more. And we have this all-inclusive approach. And really, if you get that far, that's really impressive already. I mean, that's a huge change from when you look at how we live generally. But that starts to become a bit tricky, because all of a sudden we realize that it needs wisdom. And that development of wisdom becomes very, very important with the kindness as well. So it's a real two-way development, this kindness. And it really is very rich and rewarding. So that's a quick little talk. Would anyone have any questions or any comments?
Thank you, Venerable. Just to say how interesting it was to hear the percentage of, or the proportion of times that the Buddha taught loving kindness, and what's happened, to us, and what's the effect on us that it's not such a dominant part of our practice now. Really makes me wonder, because our minds take the shape of what they rest on. And so if it was seen as being really important to spend a good proportion of our time in metta, anyway, it's given me a lot of food for thought, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's really quite a fascinating thing, and that's also part of the reason why it's kind of shunted to the side a bit, because it's, Buddhism kind of has this fixation on the tough monks who go and live in the forest, and, this emotional stuff is real men don't do metta kind of thing. But actually, to do metta is, to do metta requires a great deal of inner strength. It really does. And it really develops that inner strength as well. It's remarkable. But at the same time, the more and more you do it, the more and more you can see deeper. Because inside, very deep inside us, we build all these firewalls. It looks at the world and it says, I can't deal with this. This is too much, we're not going there. Firewall time, shut it down. And we just carry on and, survive as best as we can. Whereas all of a sudden we can see all these firewalls we built up. And that's how it becomes so good for the practice, in the sense that we can see that, yes, there's a lot of things that we're trying to protect ourselves from, but also there's a lot of things that we're avoiding and ignoring at the same time, and life becomes very, very small. And it doesn't really go anywhere. But it's such a wonderful thing to practice, because it's so rewarding on so many levels. And that leads to the equanimity, so to speak, that state where the heart can support everything. And then the troubles are gone.
I find what you're saying very beautiful. very, very beautiful and very satisfying. Living in Japan, when I first came here as a teacher many years ago, people would always say to me, the greatest value in a teacher was to be able to show kindness. And it took me a long time to get it. It really took me a long time to get it. So it's very special to hear you say what you've said this evening. I've really gained a lot from what you're saying. So thank you. Thank you, Ajahn.
You're welcome.
I'm just wondering if it's possible, if you have time, just to talk a little bit more, just for a sec, on wisdom, and why is it that we have to temper kindness with wisdom, and how does one do that?
In a sense, it's experience-based. A lot of it is experience-based, because the problem that kindness can run into is that we become hurt very easily. So, we want to love and have all this wonderful metta and everything, and we go on retreat and it's everything else, and we just see one person doing something unkind or nasty and just pow, and we feel heartbroken. And the big thing is that's the sort of the frailty where kindness can go wrong. So a big part of the wisdom actually in Buddhism is seeing where Buddhism can go wrong, where the practice can go wrong. So there's so many important things to practice. And all of a sudden it becomes more subtle. All of a sudden it becomes far more, you can say, not really adaptable, but more hands-on. Because you can see, okay, we've got to have a hands on the wheel kind of thing. We can't just let it go. It will just the car will run off the road if we do that. So the wisdom develops as you go because it's very experiential. You can feel the positive results of that kindness. And you can feel that is getting more fulfilling, and you can see more because all of a sudden those firewalls aren't that important. It feels like we're strong enough to be able to see life, to see all the things going on around us and everything else, because we have that coping mechanism, but we also have a skillful way of dealing with it. So the wisdom keeps developing as the kindness and the metta keeps developing. And the same with all the other compassion and the joy of happiness and everything else. It goes the same way. So the big thing about where wisdom really starts to become quite strong is when you aren't that affected by the trivial things that people do. You're not looking for your happiness outside of you anymore, because you have it inside. And that gives you a lot of strength and a lot of ability to maneuver through this world and through life, because we feel confident in ourselves. We feel that we have that inner strength, that we can do it. So the wisdom, so to speak, is a slow development thing, but it's experiential, because you'll kind of find as you go. The biggest danger in some ways is wanting to have everything outside of us and everyone else outside of us perfect. This is sometimes a trap that can happen to people who go to retreat centres. They're beautiful places, they're wonderful, everybody's happy and inspired and getting into the meditation, it's wonderful. And it seems like heaven. And then we go back home after the retreat, and we back into the drudgery of what we were used to, and it doesn't seem that good anymore. But once we find that happiness inside, it's far more manageable. So I hope that helps.
It does, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else got any other questions on metta and loving kindness? We have a question in the chat box which takes us away from that subject for a minute, but anyone else would like to comment, question, share? Jim?
Thank you so much, Venerable. It's a very interesting talk, and I enjoyed the meditation. I was wondering, can you give any suggestions as where one might be able to easily read about the Brahma Brahma Vihara, I hope I've said that right.
Yep.
Meditations a bit. Or any guidance at all to pursue that a little bit more?
It's a bit tricky in the text because it's mentioned more clearly as a daily practice as much as a meditation. So they kind of go together. As an individual text, it's more sort of the thing you find in the commentaries, the Visuddhimagga and other, the Vimuttimagga and things like that. But those were written really at the time that, in the Visuddhimagga, for example, the Metta meditation section is right at the end of the meditation section under Other. Kind of sort of says so it doesn't. It has some wonderful stuff in the Visuddhimagga under the Metta section, so it's worth reading. But you can kind of see that it's a bit hands off, you could say. Really, the best resource is online meditations, and there's lots of them either from the BSWA YouTube site. There's plenty of resources out there, and it's usually that's the best way to go. The texts are pretty simplistic on that level, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think I can relate to what you say very well about the need for wisdom as well with compassion and kindness, because personally I find the idea of metta meditation, it's my favourite meditation by far. I love it. It's beautiful. But at times I do find it quite exhausting as well. I wonder if that's just because if I'm feeling a bit down myself and that kind of thing, and I sort of don't have the necessary wisdom or anything like that. So, just a comment. But, thank you very much.
No, that's good. Yes, metta can, at the beginning, be a bit exhausting because you're giving so much outwards, or you're trying to give. And this is where it gets interesting. This is really where the wisdom bit comes in, because all of a sudden you realize that the moment you can give metta to yourself, there's loads of it. There's loads of it inside all of us, and it's just almost waiting to come out. So all of a sudden that just really, like opening a battery kind of thing. It gives you so much more energy both ways, both the meditation as well as the giving of it, as well as reflecting on it afterwards. That 5 years after doing metta, 10 years, or 5 months even, or even 5 minutes, you feel brighter just by doing that. But yes, it can be exhausting up until the wisdom factor starts developing. But that's also where the interest comes in, because unfortunately we don't touch on the interest level that much. We kind of treat Buddhist practice as something like machine-like, we could say, is that we just approach it as a, like washing the car, or something mundane, washing the dishes. It's just something we do, whether there's no sort of interest in what really is this. It's something alive, and that's where it becomes more energizing as well. So I hope that helps.
Anybody else?
I only wanted to say thank you. I think it was very beautiful, and I have to say, loving kindness. I'm a big fan of loving kindness. I practice it every day, and it helps me definitely with starting with the meditation also to calm my mind down. But this was the interest, what you said. I never was thinking of that one, and it's brilliant. Because I'm sometimes, I think sometimes I'm not getting bored. I really like meditation, and how to say, it's for me not a draw. I really like it, but sometimes something is missing, and I think this was the interest. That's absolutely, that was a brilliant advice. I really like that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Interest is great as well, because all of a sudden it's a whole new terrain. You can go deeper and deeper.
Yeah, but you wouldn't think about it, because as you said, you follow, it's a little bit like a script or program you run through, and this is, I think, where you, how to say, get stuck sometimes, because not every day the script should be the same, because your mind is not always the same,
Yes.
So you have to adjust. But for us, being not, I'm meditating for about 5 years, so I would say I'm a beginner. So it's you need this kind of, how to say, advice sometimes to go somewhere else. And I think this with the interest definitely will help me to progress. Thank you.
And that's another interesting point as well, because you can kind of see that the mind is different every time. Every day, every time you sit down, it's a different experience. So all of a sudden this Buddhist idea of impermanence becomes much more real. It becomes far more accessible. And all of a sudden it's not so frightening anymore, because we can approach it very easily now. And that develops a wisdom even further.
Oh yeah. And I think currently also with the Corona time, I think this is also a throw us from the mind, or it definitely throw me not in a crisis. I think I was prepared for it, but I would say it definitely changed my mindset in a lot of things, because things which were absolutely normal 2 years ago, they aren't. Currently, I think in Australia you are a little bit better off than we are in Europe, but still I think it was a major impact. And also with loving kindness and doing stuff like this, I think it definitely helps. Definitely. Or it helps me. I can't speak for anyone else. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, anybody else that would like to comment on metta, kindness, wisdom? Ooh. Okay. Venerable, there's a question in the chat box. Can I ask you that?
Yeah, go for it.
From Marlene, how can we manage our likes and dislikes? And what's the value in managing them?
Oh, that's a good question. At the beginning, likes and dislikes are very, very tricky and slippery things. We're not even aware of them. We're just sort of, I like this, I don't like it. We're just very impulse driven. Straight away we go into it. Meditation helps slow things down a bit. And the development of that kindness and wisdom in particular allows us to question a little about these priorities. It's like, I like this, but hang on a minute. I like a lot of chocolate cake, and if I eat a lot of chocolate cake, I'm going to get sick. Is this really a good thing to do? Maybe just a little bit of chocolate cake is okay. That's probably all I need. You can kind of adjust all of a sudden. Is that the feedback becomes much clearer and much more accessible. Because a lot of the time we're running after our likes and dislikes is because we're trying to run away from ourselves. That's a big one. Most of the time that we're running away is because we don't want to be here and now, so to speak. So the value of managing them is very, very big. But that can sideline, that's where we can get in trouble at the same time. Because we have this image that, I should never have unwholesome dislikes and I should only have good, saintly likes and preferences and all that kind of thing. So we're raising the bar too high all of a sudden. We're kind of making this system something that we can't achieve, which is very, very interesting, because this is a kind of self-sabotage which we can get into very easily by setting the bar too high. So managing them is valuable. It will keep us out of trouble, and we'll all of a sudden be a bit wiser in sort of saying, well, this is something which is more beneficial, this is worth pursuing, this is something that's going to help me and help others. And that's great. And by the same token, we can avoid all these problems which could, or aren't necessary to get trapped into. Because, we can't run away from all our troubles, but there's some troubles which, you just don't learn anything from it. You just don't go anywhere. It just causes more trouble than it's worth. But on a deeper level, there's that management point which can be a problem, because we start to control. And control is kind of the opposite of metta, because metta, the kindness, is synonymous with letting go. The kinder you are, the easier it is to let go. And in fact, the deeper you get and the richer that kindness becomes, the more delicious that idea of letting go is. It just becomes something natural. It becomes very, very easy. So control there can be a bit of an obstacle. So it's a middle way approach. And that's really where the meditation and indeed the metta comes in, that it's experiential. You experience this going, okay, controlling too much, I'm feeling tighter, I'm feeling more miserable, and I can't sit still for 2 minutes on my meditation cushion. That's a sign that it's going too far. So there's value in it, but when the wisdom comes in, because you've experienced what works and what doesn't, all of a sudden you know for yourself. It becomes very much... the Buddhist term is aparapachaya, which means not dependent on other people for your practice. Basically is that you know in yourself the right way and the wrong way to go. So hope that helps.
Marlene, do you want to comment on that? You can send a message in the chat box or speak. And just in case Marlene does want to, while we're doing that, there's been a message in the chat box for you, Venerable, from Shah from Adelaide. That was a great meditation. Thank you, Venerable, with Metta.
Oh, you're welcome.
Lovely to have you talk like this. Anybody else? There's been no answer from Marlene.
I want to say thank you, Venerable. That was very helpful.
Oh. You're welcome, Marlene.
That last Pali phrase that you mentioned before, can you explain that a little bit more?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
That Pali phrase that you said?
Oh, yep.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. Aparapachaya, not dependent on others. It's basically, at the beginning when we're involved with Buddhist practice, we basically are dependent on others because it's, we're not familiar with our minds, we're not familiar with what we're doing, we don't really have a great idea where Buddhism is going, what this is all about. So at the beginning we do need sort of teachers and we do need good friends that we can discuss things with and we can share ideas and to find out really how this works. Then there starts to get to that point where the meditation becomes more about the experience. And then all of a sudden you've put your hands on the wheel now. Now it's kind of, you're empowering yourself, you're building that inner strength. Let's see where this goes. So there's quite a lot of experiment going on, quite a lot of sort of just, some days you'll have wonderful meditation, some days you won't. And you'll find out why. And all these little conditional things that come on. But the more and more that you develop this internal experience, the less you need outsiders to tell you what it is. Because absolutely you'll still have questions sort of, oh, this happened in my meditation, or this happened in my life. What is it? How can I deal with it? Education and learning. So that's a very, very important part. But eventually, you're learning on your own. You're learning by yourself. And that's coming from inside. So not being dependent on others basically means at a much, much later stage, or at least when your practice is really, really going along really well, you'll find that you don't need to ask people so much anymore because it's already familiar. You already know greed, you already know happiness, you already know sorrow and everything else. You know what these emotions are and you know how you can handle them. You know how you can guide your way through life. And all of a sudden, you don't need others that much to tell you what to do because you have the answers inside you already. Hope that helps.
Thank you.
Anybody else? This is wonderful discussion. Thank you, everybody, and Venerable. We don't often get this level of discussion and questions and comments.
Well, they're always welcome.
Anybody else? This is your opportunity.
I would like to ask, This is Christina. Can maybe if I want to give some advice to my sister or brother, sometimes I can do that with gentle or kindness. So maybe sometimes I will scold them or push them. I'm just wondering if maybe sometimes scolding or by pushing, maybe is that okay to make them better? Because I think sometimes gentleness cannot help. I'm not sure about my question, but can you get the point?
Yes. And this is where the wisdom comes in, because this is where Buddhism can go wrong. This is where the kindness can go wrong. There's it's a Chinese text called Lao Fan's Four Lessons. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It has a very interesting simile in there of a judge who was basically practicing kindness to an extent that he didn't have the wisdom to go with it. And he saw this man who was drunk and, behaving badly, and he sort of was all kind and compassionate. Oh, let him go, it's okay. And he found the next day that that man had, in his drunken state, done something very, very bad. I can't remember exactly what he did, but he might have killed someone or something like that. And the judge the next day was filled with remorse, because he sort of said, if I had, sort of gently, kindly sort of put him in cells or something overnight until he sobers up and then let him go, then this wouldn't have happened. So this is where it gets tricky, because one of the big problems we have in people generally is they want sort of universal methods. I just do this and it will always work. And it's different every time, so it doesn't always work. But the approach we use, of course, comes in asking ourselves what really is going on. So understanding the context is very important before we advise someone. We can understand the situation they're in. They might be doing something because they're depressed or they're anxious or they can't think clearly. That's often a very big problem. So there's usually always a reason why they're doing something that you may want to scold them for. But there does come to that point where the next stage is then you consider what's best for them as well. Because, an act of kindness is to give an alcoholic another bottle of beer, whereas that's not really what they need. And sometimes they're not really ready for more direct teaching or more direct advice. It's usually best to wait and things cool off a bit. Of course, if they're running straight into trouble, then of course help them out as much as you can. But of course the scolding, generally you have to see where that comes from. Because a lot of time that we want to shout at somebody, it's because I'm frustrated, I'm not happy, they've offended me, all these different reasons inside. So that's cooking away inside and it's expressing itself outwards, verbally, sometimes physically as well. We abuse other people that way. So the most important question is, in some ways, is what is the least harmful thing we can do? And what is the most beneficial thing we can do? And that usually requires us, again, depends on the context, to step back for a few minutes and sort of say, what's going on? What do we need? So scolding doesn't always work, but it always depends on the context. So kindness, in a bigger sense, this is where the wisdom comes in, because what seems like kindness on a superficial level might not be kindness on a deeper level. And all of a sudden kindness becomes far more interesting, because it means that it's not always sort of, flowers and la 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 and soft, fluffy, wonderful things. Sometimes kindness means to say, hey, wake up. How can we help? Can we talk about this? It becomes more engaged, you could say. It becomes a two-way thing, because we're addressing not only our own issues, but helping them as well. So this is where the path becomes far more enriching, because you do learn a lot more. It doesn't become that scripted sort of just that ritualistic approach that we just have to be kind because we're Buddhists, because sometimes that can be harmful. We have to learn sort of what really is beneficial and what isn't. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much. I got so much insight.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Venerable, would it be possible for you to just talk a little bit about how to actually practice metta? Because there seems to be a lot of language associated with it, at least initially, like may I be happy, or as Guru used to say, love, 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 may my heart be filled with love. So, and then going to different people to send it to, but then also going to compass directions. Can you just talk about the different ways to practice? Thank you.
Yeah. Those methods are very, very good for a basic position. And there's something which, the compass positions, for example, are useful because they're all-inclusive. You know, there's nowhere excluded in that picture where you go north, south, east, west, up, down, and so on. But could
you just say that again? The video, the internet cut out, then we missed you.
Oh, I'm sorry. So a lot of those methods are useful at the beginning because they are a very inclusive approach. So the directions north, south, east, west, up, down are very inclusive, and they don't exclude anything. And that's the much higher goal, is to be all-inclusive. But with metta at the beginning, it is very, very formulaic, because this isn't an emotion that people are very familiar with. It's not something they have a lot of inside. At the beginning, for most people, they have terrible relationships with themselves, and they've shut down so much of themselves that they're just not even able to do it. And of course, some people, they also are burdened with this kind of fear of being selfish, is that, no, I can't give metta to myself, I must give it to everybody else. But you can't give metta to anybody else if you can't give it to yourself. It's a reciprocal thing. Because I know what metta is inside, I know how to give it to somebody else. Because I know kindness for myself and what's good for my health and good for my practice and good for things, that too, you know, can go outwards. So that's the way the learning thing is. So at the beginning, it is very formulaic. There's lots of terms, there's lots of things to be familiar with. But eventually, the moment we start talking about the experience of metta, all that stuff fades away, because it's just the kindness. In this approach that I sort of mentioned earlier, how all of a sudden we want to include everyone, the fulfillment of metta, how it really blossoms, is that when we realize that this sort of self-centeredness or this individualist approach is an obstacle. So that gradually, when we include everybody in that picture, there's no longer you and me in this, there's just metta. It doesn't exclude, it doesn't judge, it doesn't preclude or anything like that. So, but of course that takes time. You know, these are really sort of, you know, powerful states, and many people experience them on retreats, or just a weekend at home, or even a little taste of it of a short meditation, hopefully. But the different approaches really, really work because most people aren't familiar with their emotions, and they're kind of slippery and vague and ambiguous, whereas intellectual ideas are very, very easy to understand. Formulas are very easy to understand. You know, it's much more boom, 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 boom. Whereas all of a sudden, when that no longer applies, and it's a feeling, then that's a very, very different thing, because words don't matter at that point. Words are just an abstract, you know, they come after the experience. Metta isn't an expression of words. That's what's really interesting. So it really comes down to what works for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Did that help, or was I getting a bit vague there?
I was just reflecting on it, that was all. I think I remember Ajahn Brahm one day saying that the words were the litmus paper or something, and then there's just the feeling there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that sense of needing to be inclusive is pretty tricky for
Yes.
some of us who practice it. And so I've never used the compass directions, but I have used the going to peak myself, and then a neutral, someone we really like, and then a neutral person, and then someone who's irritated, and someone maybe who's done us harm. I found that really, really helpful, and did that for 18 months every day with that direction, and I think that was invaluable for me.
Exactly. And this is why these methods are so practical, because at the beginning you still need those guidelines, because that does help to make it inclusive. But on a much, much deeper level, once that metta is flowing, you could say, all of a sudden these words become a bit inconvenient. They actually come sort of like that, it's almost an obstacle. You sort of make the word, you want to be quiet so you can just let the metta just go everywhere. So at the beginning, the formulaic ways, they're great, use them. But eventually sort of, it just expands all on its own.
Okay, so let them go after a time, just sit with it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we've only got a few minutes left. What a wonderful evening. Anyone else like to make final questions or comments? No? You sure? Because I know that some people are quite reticent, and with encouragement they do finally speak. So is there anybody? I'm just checking to see, there's a lot of people online. Anything else?
Going to quickly ask, when you're doing that metta like that, is it okay to sort of visualize?
I can't, your voice keeps cracking up. Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
No, so when you're doing metta, like you said before, is it like sometimes what I do is I sort of visualize it rather than using the words? Is that a good way to do it, or?
Yes, visualizations are just as good as words, and sometimes they're more accessible because we're different personalities. Sometimes it's much easier to imagine, say, metta as light and spreading it, to visualize it as a flower that you share with someone else. Lots of different visualizations, and you can really tailor these. Like you can tailor the formulaic words, sort of, may so-and-so be happy, may, you can tailor all this to really build that emotion up. So that's the great thing about this practice and the visualizations and everything else, because it helps the practice. It's no longer this script. It's real now. And if that helps you, go for it. It's wonderful. One of my favorite visualizations for metta I actually mentioned. Imagine a mind of loving kindness as vast as the sky. And when you see the blue sky, or the night sky, because it's nighttime here, and you see the stars and you just see how vast it is, can you imagine a mind of kindness as vast as the sky? And you can use that. I'm getting a bit enthusiastic there, so